Significant Souls by Joe Satellites. Chapter 1. The Fugitive. The warehouse, at first glance, appeared to be deserted, but on closer inspection she noticed that in the north corner there was a scattering of reprobates, huddling together for warmth, like a new dog litter, but in this case they were all the runts. They were in deep conversation on the merits of whose turn it was to hold the bottle. Her eyes, now at one with the engulfing pitch of night, scanned the building for possible exits. Subconsciously, she immersed herself in the building, storing every facet, every niche, nook and cranny. She found it difficult to concentrate with a hole in her shoulder, and her heart galloping away like a runaway stallion, but she was well trained. She'd been tagged and followed for most of the day, and her predators proved to be worthy adversaries. The building was situated in the north side of town in the Latin Quarter and had been home to Stitch McNabb and Sons, a company specialising in the manufacturing of quality garments for big people with little pockets. But that was in the halcyon days of the 80s. Now the building stood as a poignant, miserable reminder of the boom and bust politics of yesteryear. Outside, a car was approaching. The scream of its brakes announces to the world its arrival, like some metallurgical monster from the depths of Dante. 4 doors slam almost in unison, to be followed by footsteps, urgently climbing the iron-clad fire escape. 4 black silhouettes, almost devoid of light in the hastening dusk, were congregating on the gantry, adjacent to the large steel doors that once served as a loading bay. There they waited, uncertain of their next move, or just content, like rancorous tomcats toying with prey. Penny acted instinctively. The difference between winners and losers was their ability to turn every situation to their advantage. Mimicking a drunk, she tottered towards the itinerants, faking a fall and slurring like some crazed, alliterative she-devil. In her hands she shuffled the contents of her purse, dropping coins intermittently to grab the attention of her audience. One of the vagrants, eager to acquire his next bottle ticket, hobbled menacingly into her personal space. His jaundiced eyes, fixed only on her purse, didn't see a piston-like foot sweeping in an arc until it was too late. 1 second he saw his gambit, the next a kaleidoscope of tiny stars as he flew backwards, pulled by some invisible elasticated rope. The furore that ensued could have been misconstrued as slapstick comedy, if not for the dire circumstances. Clinging like a gecko horizontally to the low suspended girder, she surveyed the madness below. By the time the tramps had realised that one of their own had been floored unceremoniously, she had vanished, along with a purse. They ran in all directions, raising hullabaloo. As they approached the south side of the building, something happened unexpectedly that rocked Penny to her core. She had set about the homeless people to facilitate the diversion, but now she heard the rat-tat-tat of no gun that she had ever studied, followed by a blue flash that consumed the dark building. The tramps were gone, vanished into thin air, and in their wake nothing but a cloying smell of an electrical fire. Penny's vision, still impaired by the blinding flash, could just make out the shapes below, searching, ever probing for their quarry. Suddenly, Penny felt a creeping sensation, which started at her ankles and progressed slowly up her thighs to her midsection, causing her taut muscles to flinch uncontrollably. Her mind was racing frenziedly, and her reserves ebbing away, as if being dissolved by some defiled organism. A feeler like a lace wrapped around her ear. An insect was trying to burrow into her head. Enough! She shot upright, glancing around the room instinctively. Her forehead was lacerated in frown marks, and at each temple a thick bulging vein pulsed in time to her heart's accelerated beat. The sheets on the bed were drenched in the turmoil of her nightmare. As her breathing slowed, she noticed the time displayed prominently on the nightstand clock, 3:30 a.m. She tiptoed silently to the bathroom. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, and she always maintained a code of silence when home. In fairness to the inhabitants below, Mr. and Mrs. Young were good neighbours, and Penny on occasion enjoyed their company. After downing a glass of cold water, Penny returned to bed, unsure if she would return to the slumber after her nightmare ordeal. She analysed each twist and turn. You can learn a lot about dreams. Sometimes it's your subconscious sending you a message or a clue. Soon, the downturned strokes of her eyelids failed to return to the open position, and the Sandman called time on a weary body. Under the pillow, a small centipede-like creature moved slowly. Eons of self-preservation taught it to be patient. It waited now, judging the rhythm of the breaths that the human was taking. The clock now showed 4:10 a.m. Slowly but surely it edged out, inching its way to the precipice of the bed where the human's head lay, now in deep sleep. Its inner thoughts yearning for the solace of a temporary new home, a unique feeding station, a new host to pupate its offspring. Once embedded in the human ear canal, it would secrete a gel into the bloodstream. Within hours, the horse would stop breathing. Within a day, the body would discolour and turn pale white. Within a week, a horde of larvae would be moving around the body. After 2 weeks, the building blocks of a Kraag would be visible. In 1 month, the process would be complete, and the alien would be able to walk amongst humans, who would be blind to the plan to replace them. This was just one more step in their bid to colonise the planet, for they need to neutralise and destroy the human species could not be stopped. It was their nature. Chapter 2. The Kraag. The Kraag had existed since the beginning of time, or at least since the notion of time. Throughout the universe, they were known as hate, immoral beings of dire, unprecedented darkness, with untold levels of pure, unadulterated wickedness and savagery. They had one purpose: overcome and destroy all living things. The planet Imri was small by most standards. The indigenous beings were a race of equine mammals, content to graze on the lush grasslands, breed during the warm season, and tend their young until they too were content to do the same. The planet had 3 suns that were distant to be almost non-existent, but the raising combination seemed to work for the planet. There was once other species on this planet, but they had succumbed to the ravages of the Kraag. The Equi were soon to become extinct also. The Kraag was so successful in their determination to overcome any species, they had destroyed countless planets throughout the known universe, and that of others also. They were like a plague, changing their appearance to become one with the species, allowing them to get close and personal with their victims until they morphed into a gaseous state, smothering their prey and infusing gel into their bodies, causing reproduction of a new Kraag. In this way, they could annihilate a planet. They were thorough. They could communicate by mere thoughts. Their intelligence far outweighed anything that they were to come up against. Once a body was taken over, the thought processes and intelligence of that body were immediately transferred to the new Kraag. Over time, the host became so advanced that they could communicate with other hosts on other planets. Their combined knowledge throughout the universe made them unstoppable. There was no hope for the inhabitants of Imri. You need to prepare yourselves. Your planet is on a collision course with a meteor. Your planet will not survive. Take all precautions and prepare to search for a new planet. The Kraag had always embraced change. To maintain their dominance throughout time, they had to adapt. They would abandon their task to convert all equine life to their cause. The leadership had announced that they should prepare to evacuate and search out a new target. They came together, morphing into a single host, a large gaseous cloud. They floated across Imri, searching for an ideal location to prepare for the impact. A mountainous region near the planet's pole was ideal for what was planned. They worked in unison inside a deep cave, pulling its rocky structure. Slowly but surely, rocks started to fly towards the centre of the cave. The rocks started to form a large sphere. Then, with the heat of an exploding sun, the rocks started to infuse into a globular mass. As the heat grew, more and more rocks flew into the mass, the Kraag pulling more and more. Then the heat started to dissipate, and the glowing ball of molten rock started to cool. As it cooled, it formed into a perfect sphere and hardened. The Kraag had performed this process many times down the eons. It was how they survived. Soon the rock would be so hard it would be impervious to any damage that a meteor strike could cause. The Kraag, now imbued into the core of the sphere, would wait patiently for the impact. Imri was soon to be replaced with another planet, other species to homogenise. Chapter 3. A Significant Soul. Penny was alone and seemed to be drifting in space. She felt none of her normal senses, but she was aware that something had changed. She couldn't feel herself. She tried to touch her arm, but it had no substance. She couldn't see anything. It was as if she was a thought without a natural shape. But she could still see her body. Maybe she was adrift in space, or perhaps having the most unusual dream. No, she remembered. She already had the most unusual dream. No, this was not a dream. This was something new. I'll try to wake up. That's it. I will wake myself up. As soon as she tried to come to her senses, she failed miserably. What felt unusual was that she didn't feel any panic. It kind of felt okay. It was relaxing. And she felt that she had no worries at all in the world. In the world? Am I even in the world? Out of complete darkness, a pinprick of light emerged. Now this was unnerving. She was okay with the complete darkness, but this new light felt weird. It started to zoom in on her location, getting larger by the second. As it slowed down, she could see that it was a person, an old lady in what looked like the Victorian fancy dress. She looked to be in her mid-80s. She had kyphosis, the curvature of her spine making her look smaller than she was. She floated directly in front of Penny, scrutinising her over her wire-rimmed small spectacles. Directly behind the old lady, another spark appeared, and this was soon to be followed by a handful more. A small lad, not yet 10 years old, appeared first and abruptly tried to move the old lady out of the way. "I saw it first, you ruffian." "But I'm younger, you old crow. You don't deserve this. Move or I shall physically hurt you." "Oh, and how are you going to achieve that then, you old bag?" I will... "You will what? You cannot move me and you definitely can't hurt me." Another large image appeared, that of a middle-aged man with a black patch over one eye. He was limping badly and dressed in the most ridiculous clothing Penny had ever seen, on an adult at least. He looked to be a clown of sorts. "Both of you, out of the way. I need to see my new soul." "Soul? Am I dead then?" Suddenly it became clear. The dream came flooding back. There was an insect trying to climb into her ear. No, wait. I awoke from that dream. Then a new image formed in her brain. Did she have a brain? The image showing her sleeping in her familiar surroundings. It was her bedroom, in her apartment. She looked serene and comfortable. But then something crept out from under the pillow. It moved slowly to her head, and just like that, it was gone, inside her ear. The following images showed her supine body changing colour. She was not breathing. Then her body was moving, but it wasn't like normal movement. It looked horrific. There was movement under her skin. Then her body opened like a ripe banana. A small baby, covered in white gel, started to writhe about as if in pain. It started to grow alarmingly fast. Within minutes, it took a familiar form. It was Penny. There was now a crowd of transparent people pushing and shoving all around her. She was obviously something that they all desired for some reason. And then a new man appeared, much larger than the rest. "She is off limits!" His booming voice calmed everyone immediately. "This is a significant soul. You cannot merge with this soul. This soul has a higher purpose. Attempting to merge with this soul will leave you bereft of any future options. Now be gone, before I lose my patience." They vanished, much quicker than they appeared. The man stood directly in front of Penny. "You've been selected for a higher purpose. You cannot return to a newborn on your planet. However, you can roam any other planet you search for additional significant souls. Once you are paired with the required amount, you will gain a power few people throughout history have attained. At this point, should you desire, you could then return to your home planet. As you acquire souls, your bodily functions will return. You will also be equipped with additional powers. They may help or cause you problems. I can give you one power to start you on your way. As a significant soul in the void, you will be targeted continually by bereft souls looking to gain a body. This will become tedious for you to the extreme. To that end, I will enrich your soul to the tune of 1, which will keep predators at bay. He searched inside his jacket and pulled out a small tuning fork. In his other hand he held what seemed to be a pebble. He brought them together, creating a high-pitching ring. Penny felt her body vibrate, resonating, the same ringing noise as the fork created. I bid you goodbye and good luck. Wait! Penny screamed, but the man zoomed out of focus and merged into the darkness. Okay, that leaves me still in the dark. What did he mean by other worlds? And what on earth is a significant soul? She decided to see if she could zoom in as the other souls present had a few minutes ago. She imagined her body leaning forward as if to start walking. Well, that did nothing. What if I imagine I'm Superman, flying at the speed of light? Penny startled herself. She was moving. She had no depth perception, as there were no objects that would give her the sense that she was moving. But she knew that she was moving. It felt exhilarating. She started to slow up, but not by her means. It seems that in the void, other things could slow you down. Maybe there's a void speed camera up ahead, or traffic lights. Maybe there's a soul traffic jam. Something started to change. Up ahead, for the first time, she could see a shimmering light. It looked like a wall of glass, but it was not solid. It wavered, ripples along its length. As she drew near, it looked more like a window of sorts. On the other side, she could see dwellings of some kind, but unlike any houses she'd ever seen before. She slowed to a standstill. She was staring through the ripples of water, maybe. In comparison to the complete blackness of the void, this looks far more exciting. She wondered if she should open a doorway. She held out a hand to touch the water. As soon as contact was made, she flew through the shimmering wall. She felt exposed and disoriented and turned about to head back the way she came. No, the shimmering wall was no longer present. She tried to take stock of the situation. Looks like we're not in canvas anymore, Toto. Chapter 4. Lawrence. A cool breeze wafted across the harbour, refreshing the busy workers, some attending to their boats. But up and beyond, the plethora of taverns and eateries were approaching for the daily onslaught of tourists, eager to lounge in the picturesque harbour, or to walk across the high wall and barrier which protected the coastal town. The sea creates the perfect holiday background noise, with waves tumbling over the pebbles and sand, sometimes destroying the fragile sandcastles left from the previous day. Seagulls flock to the port, awaiting scraps of food from stupid tourists, and vendors of cafes look on with scowls, showing their displeasure. The seagulls were present in this location long before it became a tourist attraction. Maybe people should understand this before making judgment calls. The aroma of freshly baked bread lures people in droves to the patisserie. The bread may drag them in, but it's the cakes and the fanciful wares on display that make the real money. Lawrence Dolchek wanders aimlessly along the harbour wall, content with the idyllic surroundings. Taking a year out from his master's degree course in medicine was a good choice. He was becoming a bookworm and so entrenched in his studies that he'd forgotten the world outside. It was Luke, his study pal, who convinced him that he needed to resurface from his studies and take a break. Luke was going home to Paris and then taking a year out to travel Europe. Lawrence had no real family per se. He was brought up by a distant aunt, Maggie, after his real parents abandoned him on a doorstep to disappear from humanity and swim in the delusions of LSD and other hallucinogenic atrocities. They both checked out permanently from life a year after his abandonment. He never really knew them to any great extent. He was only 3 years of age when they decided that he was encumbering their lifestyle choices and had to go. Deep down inside, he felt sad that he'd missed out on a normal upbringing. But Aunt Maggie had forced him into academia, whether he wanted it or not, and it was surely paying off. He was by far the most gifted student on his course. Professor Robinson had indicated in so many words, but students on his course were constantly asking for his help in understanding complex topics, which he found came naturally to him. His aunt was his rock. She always knew instinctively the right course of action for whatever problems needed solving. She offered Lawrence the support and love of a surrogate parent and was delighted when he decided to take a year out. She had plagued him to take a break from his studies and was adamant that his return to academia would be enhanced by the break. He travelled to Paris with Luke and intended to accompany him on his European travels. Fate, on the other hand, had other plans for him. Luke's mother, after feeling under the weather for the best part of a year, finally succumbed to a phobic fear of doctors and hospitals and relented to giving blood samples. The results were not good. Luke was reluctant to give Lawrence the full truth, but needless to say, he would be cancelling his plans to travel for the foreseeable future. The odds were not looking good for his mother, and he needed to stay close and offer his medical prowess and care for her, for what would, in all likelihood, be her final months. Luke's dad was beside himself in grief and couldn't pull himself together. Luke was needed. That was 3 months ago. Initially, he found it difficult to travel alone. He was not used to his own company, but soon he was engrossed in the countryside and at one with nature. Most people do not get the chance to sit and watch nature. He was dazzled by the natural beauty that the French countryside could offer. He travelled the back roads through small towns and villages, luxuriating in a peaceful ambience of lives which seemed to be stuck in second gear. People living the life at a much slower pace and content with their lot. He would stop for a day or two, sit with the old gents drinking strong coffee in the Gallic sunshine, listening to their conversations and picking up and understanding small parts. He realised to himself that by the end of this year out, he could speak fluent in French, maybe. Saint-Martin-de-Ré was delightful. The small cobble streets held the usual tourist shops, but if you delved further and climbed the hill, there was evidence of real France. He loved that people here would sleep for an hour or two in the afternoons. It reminded him of his nursery school. There was a small church or cathedral on a hill. It was ancient in design. Inside, the darkness held secret prayers of people worshipping for hundreds of years. There was something special about old churches. He wandered back down the hill to the quayside. It was approaching the peak time for vendors in their cafes and restaurants, and the waiters and waitresses could be seen darting to and fro in their haste to serve the starving clients. They were all in competition with each other, it seemed. Who could drag the most tourists in? Lawrence sat in a small cafe on the corner of the harbour. This particular cafe was not as busy as the others, and he found he could relax and enjoy the atmosphere better. He looked at the menu, and as always, he was conscious of his spending restrictions. His aunt had given him a daily amount of €20 for nourishment. She also gave him an emergency purse, which held €300. But he was under no illusions that she was expecting this amount back on his return. He ordered a coffee and a large piece of carrot cake. He sat there salivating until it arrived. A small stage was being erected down the quayside. When his order arrived, he asked the waiter in broken French what was the purpose of the stage. Tomorrow was Bastille Day, apparently, and a large celebration and firework display were planned for the town. He slowly devoured the carrot cake, swilling it down with the coffee. He decided to walk along the coast and explore. The wall which served as a barrier to the sea also served as a walkway. There were trees also which were a delight, full shade to the afternoon sun. Further along there was a large walled building that had once been a castle or fort. It was now a prison, from which Lawrence felt out of place in a seaside town. After passing the prison, there was a small bridge overlooking a small football field and tennis court. Eventually, around the corner of the coast, he came to a small holiday park. There were chalets, caravans and even a few tents visible, all surrounding a small shopping area. To the side there was a large gathering of people. As he got nearer, he could see that the audience was watching a game of boules. The French seemed to be besotted with the game. So he decided to stop and watch and try to see what was so fascinating. It was a close game, it seemed. The two men playing were so serious in their efforts. It was more than obvious that they were not too keen on each other, as if the professional rivalry was going too far. One of them, his massive broad shoulders and thick-set body, seemed to be pontificating about something or other, his opponent smirking and showing off his perfected Gallic shrug. The crowd were not helping matters and seemed to be goading the players on. Handbags were out. They started to shove at each other. The game now forgotten. The smaller of the two was far more nimble in his efforts and could run around the larger giant of a man. On one occasion, he kicked him hard in his derriere. The giant was furious. The crowd now seemed to mock him in unison, laughing scornfully. Rising to the bait, Mr. Shortass, now egged on by the crowds chanting, continued to ridicule the larger man, much to his fury. It almost felt like bullying. Lawrence was about to walk away in disgust when the giant, grasping a bowl in his large hands, threw it into the face of his aggressor. A sickening thud brought a gasp from the crowd. His opponent lay completely still on the sand, gasping for breath through a shattered face. A lady at the front screamed and ran away, howling. Most just stood still, aghast at what they were seeing. Some looked guilty, as they were, truth be known, guilty by participation. Without thinking, Lawrence ran to the man to see if he could somehow help aid him. He was struggling to breathe. His nose and cheekbone were shattered. He was coughing hard and blood was streaming from his mouth. The large man shouted at Lawrence to move away, or he would receive the same treatment. This was lost on Lawrence. His regional dialect didn't aid one iota of his meaning. He tried to unbutton the man's collar, but the blood was causing his fingers to slip off the buttons. And then everything went black. He had a funny sensation at the back of his head, but apart from that, blackness, a deep void of nothingness. He awoke to what he thought later described as the friendliest face he had ever seen. He was in a hospital bed, in a ward of sorts. There were maybe 10 beds in all. The nurse who was beaming at him said in broken English, "You have received a blow to your head. You have been lying unconscious for 8 days. Your name, is it remembering for you?" Lawrence laughed out loud at her poor English, but she had the face of an angel, and he felt that he had a connection with her for some reason. "My name's Lawrence Dolchek. Lawrence Dolchek." "Très bien, merci, Lawrence. You need to rest now. You were injured quite a lot big, and we had to perform surgery on your brain to stop the bleeding. Please rest for now, yes?" Lawrence was indeed shattered and slowly relaxed until sleep took him. He awoke several hours later as darkness now was visible through the ward's many windows. The pretty nurse was leaning over him, whispering words that he didn't understand, so he smiled at her. His eyesight, it seemed, was not working as it should, for she seemed to be shimmering slightly. Her face looked to be transforming into something. Maybe he was dreaming, but no, he was not dreaming. The nurse was slowly fading away. It looked like something out of a science fiction film where the character was peeling away like smoke in the wind. She turned completely into a small cloud, a kind of white gas. It smelled terrible. It was cloying, and he found it difficult to breathe. Then darkness resumed. He had no recollection of how long he was unconscious, but he felt different. He couldn't move, and his brain felt befuddled. He couldn't concentrate at all. He felt anxious, and his heart was beating to a strange beat, increasing by the second, until he felt like a woodpecker trying to get out of his chest. His breath started to match his heart. He couldn't breathe, it seemed, and then his heart stopped, along with his breathing. The process would take 2 to 3 weeks before he would evolve another Kraag to aid the mission. Chapter 5. Collision. The Roche limit, sometimes referred to as the Roche radius, is the distance within which a celestial body held together only by its gravity will disintegrate due to the second celestial body's tidal force exceeding the first body's gravitational self-attraction. Inside the Roche limit, orbiting material will tend to disperse and form rings, while outside the limit, the material will tend to coalesce. The term is named after Edouard Roche, the French astronomer who first calculated this theoretical limit in 1848. The collision of both planets caused an interesting outcome. The aftermath caused 3 important outcomes. Firstly, a large amount of debris was formed, amongst which would in turn fuse together and create many new moons. The main bulk of both planets merged together to make one large mass, which would become molten for billions of years. One spherical hardened mass would continue in search of a new planet. We have identified a new planet which is rife with life. You will alter your course in good time. The Stegosaurus was busy eating plants and herbs. Recently, it had an altercation with a carnivorous Tyrannosaurus rex. It was lucky to escape with only a few of its bony plates along its spinal column of its back torn away. The plates were attached to its skin and not part of the spinal column. As painful as it was, eating was a good distraction as dinosaurs went. This specimen was only 9 metres in length. It wasn't the smartest of creatures either. Its brain was about the size of a plum. It continued its path along the basin near the water's edge. There was much more hazardous creatures to be wary of, but for now she seemed happy with a lot. Up ahead, a huge tree had fallen in her path. She attempted to climb over the obstacle to no avail. After a few minutes of deliberation, she decided to turn about and forage back the way that she travelled. There was movement off to the right. Up in the canopy of the trees, a snarling face was searching. The T-Rex had tracked her down. She stayed perfectly still. Not all predators had good eyesight, and keeping still in the past had served her on more than one occasion. However, this predator may have poor eyesight, but it made up for its loss with a perfect sense of smell. It slowly turned its head in her direction. She couldn't run, as the way behind her was barred by the fallen tree. While she was still in shock, the T-Rex made its move. It emerged from the trees and rushed in her direction. A loud boom from above stopped the predator in his tracks. A red-hot sphere shot across the sky, trailing black smoke. It happened so fast, but the whole area was stunned into silence, and then it hit. It was not as big as the meteor that would one day create a crater of a diameter 150 kilometres, but it was a substantial hit and caused mayhem in the area. Scientists in the future would declare that the demise of dinosaurs was created by an asteroid hitting Earth. The Kraag, given enough time, could create far more damage.